Morning everyone, 7 o'clock. Very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Almost 3 weeks since Nicola Bulley took her dog for a walk and never went home. Vanished, seemingly without trace. This morning, there's criticism for Lancashire police after they revealed new personal information about Nicola's struggle with alcohol and the menopause. We'll have the latest from St Michael's on Wire. Plus, the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as First Minister of Scotland begins after her surprise resignation yesterday. We'll take you through all the runners and riders, and we'll be joined by the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, in just a moment. It is Thursday, the 16th of February. Police in Lancashire reveal new personal details about missing mum Nicola Bulley and her issues with alcohol after they classified her as high risk.
I'll have the latest from St Michael's on Wire as it emerges that officers previously visited her home for a welfare check.
The search to find a new Scottish First Minister gets underway after yesterday's surprise resignation by Nicola Sturgeon.
We're live at Holyrood with the SNP's National Executive set to decide on the terms and timetable for selecting a new leader.
Teaching unions demand action from the Secretary of State over the shocking state of school buildings. The moment a victim's family member charged at a white supremacist in court as Peyton Gendron is sentenced to life in prison without parole. In Turkey, the miracle rescues after 9 days trapped under rubble. A family's fresh hope for justice. Police say they'll re-examine the death of Ricky Reel, who was found in the River Thames after a night out in 1997. One of the great Hollywood icons, Raquel Welch, has died at the age of 82. And
I'm picking up vibrations. She's giving me the excitations. I'm picking up.
And does this song make you feel happy? According to one professor, it's all down to a special formula.
Good vibrations.
Morning, everyone. Lancashire Police facing a backlash this morning after officers revealed new personal details about the missing mum, Nicola Bulley. After describing her disappearance as high risk, detectives clarified that she'd had problems with alcohol and that there had been a previous concern about her welfare. Nicola disappeared nearly 3 weeks ago while walking her dog along the river in the small village of St Michael's on Wire, seemingly baffling investigators and the local community. Let's get more, should we? Lisa standing by for us this morning at the scene. Hello to you, Lisa. A lot of criticism for the police this morning, talking about alcohol abuse and the fact that she was suffering from the menopause.
Yes, that news conference was very forthright yesterday, wasn't it? And if the aim was to try to dampen some of the swirling speculation surrounding this case, it failed and failed miserably. Now, during that news conference, police mentioned that Nicola had had these specific vulnerabilities, which meant she was categorised as a high-risk missing person. We'd never heard that before, and they wouldn't elaborate further. Then hours later, they did. They went into specific detail, quite unusual detail, about the problems Nicola had been facing, problems with alcohol brought on by the menopause that had resurfaced more recently and meant real challenges for her family. And they said that 17 days before she disappeared, they had responded to concerns for welfare at her home, both police and healthcare professionals. Now, they said that no one was arrested during that incident, but they said, interestingly, that it was still being investigated. Now, this level of unprecedented detail has been criticised by MPs and campaigners, saying it is deeply troubling, questioning how it helps the investigation, and saying, should Nicola be found safe and well, as everybody hopes here, this is exactly what these yellow ribbons on this bridge are for, yellow ribbons of hope, then what a breach of privacy it is for her, and people questioning whether it is about Lancashire Police managing their reputation rather than driving the investigation further forward.
OK, for now, thank you. Well, also this morning, the race to replace Nicola Sturgeon as Scotland's First Minister begins after her surprise resignation yesterday. No one has officially thrown their hat into the ring yet, but the SNP Executive Committee will meet later on today to set out the timetable for electing a new leader. Let's have a look at what happens next. Once the First Minister has tendered her resignation to the King, she's done that already, the Scottish Parliament has 28 days to nominate her successor. But first, the SNP party must choose a new leader. Candidates must have at least 100 nominations from party members from at least 20 local branches. If more than one candidate receives the required nominations, there will be a postal vote. Frontrunners so far include Bookie's favourite Angus Robertson, a former SNP Westminster leader, now Constitution, External Affairs and Culture Secretary. There he is. Kate Forbes, Scottish Finance Secretary, is also well regarded. She's currently on maternity leave. Health Secretary Humza Yousaf is also in the running, as well as former party leader John Swinney, currently Deputy First Minister and Acting Finance Secretary. And the leader of the SNP in the House of Commons, Stephen Flynn, is with us now. Hello to you, Mr. Flynn. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us on the programme. Why was this the right time for her to go?
Morning, Kate. I think Nicola made clear yesterday that, of course, the challenges of high office, and lest we forget that Nicola has been a cabinet secretary, the deputy first minister, and the first minister itself over the course of the last 16 years, has taken its toll. I like everyone in the SNP. I'm pretty gutted that Nicola's taken this decision. She's been a formidable leader of our party, a formidable leader in the Scottish Government. As she did yesterday, throughout her tenure, she approached her resignation speech with that typical empathy, warmth and humility that came to personify her leadership of the Scottish Government. And, you know, she's been a personal inspiration to me and so many others. So it's been a sad thing to see her take this decision, but I entirely understand her reasons for doing so.
Yeah, hastily abandoned the party after mistakes of her own making is what I was reading in the newspaper this morning. A good day for unionism.
Don't believe everything you read in the papers.
Well, I'm a journalist and I appreciate my colleagues in print, even if you don't. They say that, they were mistakes of her own making. How do you regroup from this?
I don't think it's necessarily a case of regrouping. We're in an incredibly strong position. We're obviously polling exceptionally well in Scotland as a party. We know that in terms of independence, the numbers tend to fluctuate between 50 and 50, just above 50% and just below 50%, which I think is incredibly positive. We've had a very successful Scottish local elections last year, where I think we got a record number of councillors. So the party's in an incredibly strong position. And more important than that, we've got an exceptional bunch of MSPs in Holyrood, one of whom will now become the leader of the SNP and indeed the leader of the Scottish Government. I think that's quite an exciting thing, and I look forward to them setting out their agenda and taking the party forward.
Do you acknowledge it's a good day for unionism?
I'm not really focused on unionism, if I'm honest. Like I say, I think the Scottish National Party is in an incredibly strong position. And whether you've listed a number of names there, there's some others who I'm sure may well be considering putting themselves forward to be the next leader of the party. And, you know, these are folk with an incredible abundance of experience. They're also, like Nicola, excellent communicators. And I've no doubt that we're going to be in a strong position going forward. And that's where my focus understandably lies, Kate.
Yeah, is now the time for the SNP potentially to make their case less about independence and more about domestic policy?
I don't think we've done anything but make our case about independence based upon domestic policy, because if you look at many of the challenges that exist within society at this moment, so the pressures on our NHS, much of that is born directly from the fact that we are struggling to recruit people in social care as a result of leaving the European Union. Obviously, problems that were made by the UK government, not the Scottish government. So no matter which way you look at things in terms of the challenges we face, I firmly believe that we could do things much better if we had the full powers of an independent nation. So the two things, the domestic challenges and indeed independence, are interlinked, and we'll continue to make that case to the Scottish people. 25
people a week losing their lives to a drug death. The latest figures coming out later on this year. I mean, that's not down to leaving the European Union, is it?
No, it's not. And many of those challenges are born from one of the cities where I grew up, which is something which is incredibly tough to take. These are these are generational problems, Kay. There's quite clearly been generational issues in Scotland in relation to drugs and indeed with alcohol. The Scottish Government's obviously put a significant amount of funding in relation to the drugs challenge as it stands. There's a task force which was set up. I know there's a particular minister who's tasked in the Scottish Government with trying to overcome these problems, and we are all focused on overcoming these problems. But these are generational issues, and I think everyone is very well aware of that in Scotland.
Nicola Sturgeon said that she will stay on in Parliament. Will she not be a distraction by doing that?
No, I think that's entirely the right thing to do. Nicola Sturgeon is an incredibly experienced leader, as I've already highlighted, and I think it's a good thing. I think the people of Scotland will be quite comforted by the fact that she'll be there holding the reins for the coming weeks whilst the party selects a new leader and a new First Minister. And let's not escape from the fact that there is ongoing big challenges to come, and making sure that there is that continuity at the top is very important.
You've said that you won't stand as the next leader. Who are you backing?
Yeah, indeed, I'll not be standing. Of course, the next leader of the Scottish National Party needs to have the ability to be First Minister. No MP has the ability to be First Minister for obvious reasons, that we're located in London and not Edinburgh. In terms of who I'm backing, I've not seen anyone throw their name into the ring yet. Once names start going into that ring, I'll have conversations with my colleagues, see what their policy priorities are in terms of the immediate challenges that we face, how they intend to overcome some of the issues in relation to the economy, in relation to the health service, in relation to the cost of living crisis, and indeed our energy future, and of course how they set out their pathway to that independent future. And I'm looking forward to that positive discussion once my colleagues decide whether they want to put themselves forward or not.
Yeah, you did say though that it was a party of untold riches. Who would you like to see put their names forward?
I think it would be unfair of me, Kay, particularly given what the First Minister said in terms of the pressures of office and the toll it can take to put additional pressure onto someone when they're probably having discussions with their nearest and dearest at the moment as to whether they stand or not. So I'm not going to put an additional layer of pressure onto any particular individual. But what I will do is obviously speak with them all, if indeed there is more than one, who puts himself forward to be the leader of the party, and engage with them to see and what their policy priorities are and their values going forward.
Do you still think that the next election should be a de facto referendum on independence?
I actually think so. The party was intending on having a conference on the 19th of March to outline the next stage for us in terms of what comes next. Because obviously we've been told by the UK Supreme Court that we don't have the powers to hold an independence referendum, despite the repeated mandates that Nicola Sturgeon and the party have won at numerous Scottish elections. So we need to chart that next course. How do we get to that independent future? Now, the de facto referendum was obviously put forward by the First Minister, and we were going to be discussing and debating the merits of that at that party conference. I personally think that party conference should be paused for obvious reasons. I think the new leader should have the opportunity and indeed the space to set out their position, their values and their intentions going forward. So that would be my take in relation to that, Kay. I think it's sensible that we do hit the pause button on that conference and allow the new leader the opportunity to set out their vision.
But in answer to my question, do you think the next election should be a de facto referendum?
Like I say, I think it's important that the new leader, and there will be a new leader, is given the opportunity to clearly set out their platform. We know that it was Nicola Sturgeon's preference to have a de facto referendum. Indeed, it was my preference as well. But I'm not going to try and bind the hands of any potential successor. I think it's important that we have, or we allow them the opportunity to set out their intentions in due course, and I'll listen to what they have to say closely.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks. We'll be speaking to Joe in just a second. Just want to bring you some breaking news, though. Stand by, Joe, if you would. Centrica, the company that owns British Gas, has reported record profits for their 2022 financial year, operating profits of £3.3 billion. We'll get more. How are you doing with your gas bill? We'll get more on that, and we'll update you as soon as we can. Joe standing by for us outside the Scottish Parliament. Hi, Joe. What did you make of what we heard then from Mr. Flynn?
And not wanting to give anything away so far, Kay, I think for Mr Flynn, as for the rest of the SNP, shock is subsiding. They're now trying to work out who and what is next. The party's national executive are meeting tonight, not in person but online, to decide on the terms and timetable for selecting a new leader. The expectation is it could take around 6 weeks, but the last time there was a contested leadership election in the SNP was almost 20 years ago. That took 2.5 months. So I think vaguely put April in your diary as the time we could get a new leader. As for the candidates, of course, nobody has a sort of website or promotional video to launch now because they weren't expecting Nicola Sturgeon's resignation. And of course, because it's recess here, it's half term, many of the potential candidates aren't even in the country. One, I understand, is in the Caribbean and therefore may be hot-footing it back to the UK, as of course Boris Johnson did last year. The one opposition party that thinks they can get most advantage from this is Labour, Scottish Labour. Spoke to one senior figure who said there was always 2 barriers to the party recovering north of the border. One was the possibility of being a government in Westminster. That now looks possible according to opinion polls. The second thing was getting rid of their key opponent, getting her off the political stage. That, of course, was Nicola Sturgeon. As to the future of independence, yes, the most sort of persuasive and talented advocate of Scotland leaving the UK has left the stage. But also I think worth remembering, Kay, that Nicola Sturgeon, alongside Alex Salmond, completely transformed the reputation of the SNP and the reputation of the argument for independence. It is now an incredibly mainstream political opinion and, of course, a mainstream party, the establishment party of Scotland. That, of course, is Nicola Sturgeon's legacy, and it's a very good one to hand over to whoever succeeds her.
For now, thanks very much, Joe. Thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, Neil O'Brien, the Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State at the Department of Health, otherwise known as a Health Minister, will be joining us on the programme. Speaking to Dr Mustafa Erdik from the Turkish Earthquake Foundation on the devastating earthquakes which struck Turkey and Syria last week. And later we'll be joined by Marcin Underhill, a former police officer involved in the Sarah Payne case in 2000, to discuss the latest on the missing woman, Nicola Bulley. Education unions have written an urgent open letter to the Education Secretary highlighting the shocking state of school buildings. They're calling for the government to take urgent action to ensure deteriorating school buildings at risk of collapse are made safe. Let's get more with Rachel Venables. Forgive me, Rachel. Good morning to you. What is the latest? Good morning.
Well, back in December, the Department for Education raised the risk assessment of school buildings in England collapsing as very likely. And there's been growing alarm for some years now about the state of our dilapidated schools, of crumbling classrooms, particularly amongst schools that were built in the years after the Second World War, thanks to budget constraints at the time and the materials used. Many of them are now entering the end of their life expectancy. So today, a coalition of 7 unions, including Unite, GMB, the NEU, have written to the Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, urging immediate action. They say that pupils' and teachers' lives are being put at risk by the state of these school buildings. They want to know how many buildings are at risk of collapse or partial collapse. They want to know what the government is doing to try and fix them. And they also say they need urgent action, more funding to go into the problem as well. Well, in response, the Department for Education say they take the safety of pupils and staff extremely seriously. They say if they know of a building that poses an imminent risk of collapsing, immediate risk is taken, action is taken. But at the moment, they don't know of any buildings that remain open in this state.
OK, thanks so much indeed. Thanks a lot. Should we talk about that and lots of other things with the government ministers joining us this morning? Hi, it's great to see you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr O'Brien. Let's talk about schools very quickly. Our school buildings are literally collapsing. What are you going to do about it?
Well, we are investing across the piece in both maintenance and indeed new school buildings, and also driving kind of reforms by getting schools to work together in multi-academy trusts, which allow them to work more efficiently so that we get more for the taxpayers' money. So, as well as the physical investment, we're trying to drive up standards by getting those schools to work together and replacing failing schools with better leadership that can drive up standards over time.
It's not going to help if the buildings are falling down, though, is it?
And of course, we are making major capital investments across the school's estate. We will, of course, respond to any particular issues where there's any kind of issue about safety very, very quickly, just as we have in the past. So absolutely, we will make sure that, that every child at school is safe, of course.
OK. You're here to talk about drugs, knife crime today. Apparently, home counties' knife crime is soaring, and drug networks are spreading out from the cities and going into these home counties, county lines, as we hear about. What's the government going to do to try to sort that out?
Well, firstly, I'm not sure that's right. Actually, knife crime's down about 8% in the last year. Neighbourhood crime down about 24%. And what we're going to do about it is today we're announcing another 400.
My figures. Let me just.
I was giving the national figure.
Yeah.
And so in terms of what we are.
10 times the level it was a decade ago, knife crime in the home counties.
So you asked the question, what are we doing about this? So one of the things we're doing about it, as well as criminal projects like Project Adder that are about disrupting the county lines that you just mentioned. We're also today investing an extra £400 million over the next 2 years in drug treatment, because we know that getting people into drug treatment dramatically cuts crime, cuts reoffending. And so we're going to invest £400 million, which takes up the total level of funding by about 40%. We'll have a record number of people put into drug treatment. Because, you know, before I was a politician, I used to work with people who were street homeless, and I saw both the misery of their lives, of those people who were crack and cocaine addicts, but also how chaotic they were for society, the disruption they caused, the cost to society of that acquisitive crime. We know that drugs and drug addictions are behind about half of all crime, and that's why by bringing up the number of people into treatment to a record level, by having that huge investment, that will help to stop crime and the causes of crime, really.
What's your view on the drug problem north of the border?
Well, in truth, the worst place in the entire of the UK for drug addictions for a long time has been Scotland, particularly Glasgow. So this is very much something that's happened in Nicola Sturgeon's own backyard now. The policy for this is devolved. Ultimately, it is on the Scottish Government, and I do think that they do need to do things differently there. And so our approach here, south of the border, has been to fight this on all fronts. So firstly, having the 20,000 extra police that we're investing in. We'll have delivered that manifesto commitment to have 20,000 extra police by March, ahead of schedule. In terms of stopping people being released from prison so quickly, so we've ended early release at the halfway point so that people serve longer sentences that they deserve and we have less people coming out and causing more crime. Okay. And then also to get, as I'm saying today, at the causes of crime by investing heavily in treatment so we don't have people causing crime because of drugs. Yeah,
we don't need to go into the fact that, you know, you cut more than 20,000 police officers and you're just going back to what you were previously. Is it Nicola Sturgeon's fault that they have such a big drug problem in Scotland?
I think I would say two things. So on the one hand, this does predate Nicola Sturgeon. It's not entirely her fault, but I do think that the Scottish Government does need to have a different approach and to look at what is going on in Scotland. They do have, it's not just in the UK that they have the highest rates. It is really the capital of Europe in terms of some of these problems.
I'm asking you if it's Nicola Sturgeon's fault.
I always think in politics, the constructive thing to say is what should we actually do about it? And I can tell you what we're doing in England, which is a combination of more police, the end of early release, plus investments. And this is just one of them in tackling the causes of crime. We're also doing things like the Safer Streets Fund that help people to make their own neighbourhoods more secure and to tackle some of these problems locally. So we are tackling this on all fronts. And I think rather than just us saying blame, it's your fault, we say what we are doing about it here and what we think they should be doing about it there as well.
She certainly managed to keep Labour out of government, SNP really wiping the floor with Labour at the last election. She's gone, depends who takes over from her. It's another blow to the Tories though, isn't it?
Well, to be honest with you, one of the things that kept Labour out of government in the last election was Jeremy Corbyn and their own policies. Though the person who was trying to make him Prime Minister is now their leader, so there you go. But no, I don't think it was only Nicola Sturgeon that was keeping Labour from being in there. And her going is something that, of course, the Scottish Conservatives and the Conservatives have been campaigning for. It's an opportunity for us to do better in Scotland, because I think it is apparent to people in Scotland now that the SNP are a bit played out. In public services, things are not working. If you look at things like the ferries contract, it's a disaster. Many of the other things that they're doing are going wrong, and there's a reason that why Nicola's gone now. Like, on the one hand, we've always worked respectfully with her, even though we disagree with her. On the other hand, you know, the railroading through of gender self-ID has been divisive, not just in Scottish politics generally, but within her own party. There's been huge divisions over this. Things about the loans, her problems have been mounting for a while, so it's not completely surprising that she's chosen this moment to go. And of course, we will work respectfully with whoever emerges as her successor, because they do currently have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. But we, of course, profoundly disagree with her, and most importantly of all, about independence. And we think that the people in Scotland made a decision, they made the right decision to stay in the UK in a national referendum. That was said to be a once-in-a-generation occasion. That should be how it is, because if you're just constantly campaigning for yet another referendum, that is hugely destabilising for Scotland. It's bad for jobs
I put that to Mr. Flynn,
and for investment in Scotland.
Earlier. Yeah. I'm sure you have loving, caring women in your life. What do you make of the stuff that we're seeing on the front of the papers today, where the police are giving far too much information about Nicola Bulley and the fact that, you know, she's struggling with the menopause and so she was abusing alcohol? I mean, is that really what we need to read about her?
So it's not for me to second-guess a live police operation or to say what they should be doing or to condemn the way that they are going about their operation. And I'm sure that some other people involved in this would have a different point of view and say, oh, we should have, because I heard one of the relatives saying, oh, we should have known about this earlier on, we could have searched differently. In terms of what we can do for people in this situation, that I can talk about, and we do have our women's health strategy. We are investing in making things like HRT much cheaper. We're bringing in a prepayment certificate for that to cut the cost of HRT and things like that. So in the bits that we are responsible for in terms of women's health, we are a human level. It's not for me to...
You wouldn't want that sort of stuff about your loved ones being on the front page of the papers.
Yeah, and the other thing I probably wouldn't want is some minister in the government who is not close to the investigation starting to opining on who should be doing their jobs how in different ways. I mean respectfully, it would be wrong for me to stick my oar in about how the police are doing the job on this, or you know, who should have known what and when. I think at the moment there is a live search in a really a really difficult situation there at the moment. And I hope.
I know if it was one of my loved ones, I wouldn't want all that stuff on the front page.
That's perfectly reasonable point of view, but it's not for me to start saying that the police are doing the wrong thing by talking about the situation. I can only hope for the best resolution in this, and we can talk about the things that we can do as a government. But at the moment, there is this search going on still, and I don't think it would be right for me to start to wade in that kind of stuff.
First time you've been here in the studio with me. It's great to see you.
It's a real pleasure, and really thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thanks a lot, Minister. Thank you. Let's move on to other news for you now, and we're looking at some of the other headlines making news this morning. We were just talking about Jeremy Corbyn there, weren't we? He's hit back at Sir Keir Starmer's decision to block him from standing as a Labour candidate at the next general election. Mr Corbyn called it a flagrant attack on the democratic rights of party members in his constituency of Islington North. Sir Keir said his predecessor would have to stand as an independent if he wished to remain a Member of Parliament. New figures suggest more than 2 in 5 people are rationing necessities or relying on help from others to stay on top of credit payments. In a survey, the debt charity Step Change also found almost half of people said their financial situation is worse than it was a year ago. Just a reminder that Centrica, that owns British Gas, has just recorded record profits. We'll tell you more about that in just a short time. The University of Oxford has been awarded £16.5 million to research whether CBD can treat psychosis or psychotic symptoms. The Wellcome Trust awarded the money to the university's Department of Psychiatry to launch a global clinical trial later this year.
We love our kids. We never go in those neighborhoods and take people out. Don't do it.
This happened during the sentencing hearing for a white supremacist who killed 10 black people at a supermarket in Buffalo in New York in May of last year. An unidentified family member charged at Peyton Gendron in court minutes before he was sentenced to life in prison without any hope of parole. Quick look at the weather for you. Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Now, was this Yorkshire's biggest and fiercest dinosaur, dating back around 166 million years? A metre-long footprint has been found belonging to a flesh-eating dinosaur from the theropod series. It was found on the Yorkshire coast by archaeologist Mary Woods and will go on display once conservation is complete. I can't see it. Oh yeah, I can. There you go. It's here. You see it? Quite a big guy. It's going to go on display in the fullness of time. Now, a little earlier, I spoke to the SNP Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn, after Nicola Sturgeon's surprise resignation yesterday. He told me the party should take a pause while they wait for the new leader to set out their new vision for the party.
We've been told by the UK Supreme Court that we don't have the powers to hold an independence referendum, despite the repeated mandates that Nicola Sturgeon and the party have won at numerous Scottish elections. So we need to chart that next course. How do we get to that independent future? Now, the de facto referendum was obviously put forward by the First Minister, and we were going to be discussing and debating the merits of that at that party conference. I personally think that party conference should be paused for obvious reasons. I think the new leader should have the opportunity and indeed the space to set out their position, their values and their intentions going forward. So that would be my take in relation to that, Kay. I think it's sensible that we do hit the pause button on that conference and allow the new leader the opportunity to set out their vision.
Ali is here. Good morning, Ali. What did you make of what he had to say?
I mean, he was treading a very careful line, wasn't he? Really careful not to say anything. I thought it was quite interesting. I mean, you were asking him, did he want to be the new leader? I didn't think he said he didn't want the job. He said he couldn't do it because he's an MP. And of course, there has been precedent in the past. Douglas Ross was also an MP, but Ruth Davidson stood in on the Conservative side. So he says he can't go for it, but I didn't get the sense that he didn't necessarily want to go for it. Obviously, today, it's all about the direction of the SNP. We've looked at Nicola Sturgeon's legacy. What is the role of independence going to be? And this is a party that is being pulled in different directions. We know the question about whether next election should be a de facto referendum is at the heart of this. He was saying that is something that he has said he believes in the past, but he thinks the process of looking at that should be paused. There's meant to be a conference in March. He thinks that should be paused while they wait for a new leader. He was very careful not to say who he thinks that should be. No one's put their hat in the ring yet. Of course, we've heard all the names, Kate Forbes, Angus Robertson, Hamza Yusuf, various others. John Swinney, the return of John Swinney. Some saying, he could be the kingmaker. He's obviously been an influential figure in SNP politics, former SNP leader for a while. So today, I think things could start to move quite quickly if we start to see some people throwing their hats in the rings. But obviously, whoever takes over has a big challenge that will impact Scottish politics and the landscape of British politics really as well. Yeah, for now, thanks very much, Ali. Thank you. Let me bring you some more detail on the breaking news in the last hour that British Gas owner, Centrica, their profits have more than tripled since 2021. The supplier's adjusted gains for last year rose to £3.3 billion, up from 948 million. It's likely to have been driven by higher energy prices, of course, and continued success of its electricity generation and gas production units. Now, more than a week after the devastating earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, there have been some miraculous rescues. Teams rescued a woman who defied the odds and survived 222 hours, just over 9 days, trapped under a shattered building in Kahramanmaraş. The lady and her 2 children pulled from a collapsed building in Antakya as well, in southeastern Turkey. Cordelia has more for us now. Hi to you, Cordy. Good morning. Oh, my goodness me. Every time our viewers see those images, it's just so devastating, isn't it?
It really is, and everywhere you go, you see that devastation play out, Kay. Today we're in Kirikin. We're about an hour from the Turkey-Syria border here, and just look. You've got these buildings totally crushed, and it's about the livelihoods that have gone with them. This was a restaurant that was popular. You'd have lots of people in the evening gathered around. Now this car next to it It's completely gone, and I think people are really struggling now. They are trying to clear things up with their own hands. Kirrikin is not a place that has seen lots of aid, lots of search and rescue operations, so people are just getting on with it themselves, and there is rising concern about health as well, of cholera, of sanitation, of the water supply as well. And we're here because we're making our way to that border crossing with Syria. Now, there are 3 aid routes that have been made available. Assad met with the UN humanitarian chief, agreed that vital supplies could come through. The UN say 100 trucks have crossed on those 3 routes, but it's simply not enough so far. They're making an appeal, the UN, for £397 million more to help those desperate areas in the rebel-held northwest. And we're going to try and get a sense of what the picture there is, Kay. But frankly speaking, these are the early days of the disaster, people really trying to work through their own grief, the trauma. We've met children who have been orphaned by this earthquake who look totally bewildered. Yes, there are those astonishing stories of people that have made it through, but alongside those as well, the thousands that haven't, and they are calling, or at least coming to an end, some of the searches in some of those areas, but still faint hope in certain pockets of this country that's now really reeling from just a devastating moment in its history.
OK, thanks very much for the update, Cordelia, thank you. We will return to the situation in Turkey and, of course, in northwestern Syria throughout the course of the programme. Meantime, after more than 2 decades of campaigning, there could finally be hope for the family of Ricky Reel. The 20-year-old was found dead in the River Thames at Kingston. It's taken years, but now police are re-investigating what happened that night. Shaman has more.
On October 14th, 1997, Ricky Reel went missing after being out with friends. A week later, his body was discovered in the River Thames. No one was ever arrested for his death, and his family never received answers, only accusations and discrimination.
The police officer turned around to my husband and my friend, and he said, well, you never know, your son may have run away because he doesn't want to be at home, or he may have a girlfriend that you don't approve of, or he winked and he said he may be gay. And then he turned around and he said, well, you never know, you Asian people always arrange your children's marriages, and maybe he has escaped.
For the past 25 years, Sukhdev has been fighting for answers.
I have missed my children's upgrowing. I have missed the school evenings, and I missed a lot of things. But I had to do what I had to do.
She refused to give up and always maintained her theory. She believes her son was murdered. Ricky had been out with a group of friends celebrating a birthday when they were racially attacked by 2 men. They all ran in different directions, and whilst the rest of them made it home, this was the last place that Ricky Reel was seen. It would take 7 days before his body was found at the bottom of the River Thames. The police concluded at the time that he likely fell in while trying to urinate. But a jury inquest would later find that they failed to gather enough evidence. It's been 25 years, but this week the police announced that it will re-investigate and re-examine his case with fresh eyes to explore every possible avenue. And after meeting with the Commissioner himself, Sukhdev is hopeful but weary.
Actions speak louder than words. Yeah, so time will tell.
Shaman Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Now, Raquel Welch, one of the most famous Hollywood stars of the 60s and 70s, has died at the age of 82 following a short illness. Ivor has more.
You may not know the film, but you'll almost certainly know the image. Raquel Welch and her fur bikini in 1 million years BC left an indelible mark on Hollywood and transformed the actress into a global sex symbol almost overnight. For decades, she was the star without whom no party was complete. in demand at all the top red carpet events.
Why did you come to the festival tonight?
Because I love New York. That's it. Nothing intellectual about it.
She starred in over 30 films, including Fantastic Voyage and The Three Musketeers, for which she won a Golden Globe. And as her fame grew, so too did Hollywood's obsession with her, Playboy crowning her the most desired woman of the 70s, though she refused to ever pose naked.
I don't really consider myself a sex symbol. I know that I have that sort of, sign hanging over my head or around my neck where I show up because of that poster and because of the way I came on the scene and the early part of my career. And, it's not such a bad thing.
But it was an image she strived to move away from, even taking on a male role on Broadway and confounding those who thought her acting was based solely on her looks.
Now, were you concerned, being such a beautiful woman, that you would have a little bit of a whatever playing a man?
No, I thought that was part of the fun of it. The whole fun of it was that I'm a very girly girl, and so then to change me into a guy made it even more fun.
In later years, she went on to become a successful businesswoman, making millions with a line of wigs. But her lasting image will be as one of the Hollywood bombshells, and proof they don't always have to be blonde. Ivor Bennett, Sky News.
Raquel Welch, who has died at the age of 82 after a short illness. Now, does this song make you feel happy?
I'm picking up vibrations. She's giving me excitations.
Well, there's a reason for that. This song is top of the list for its good vibes. A university professor called Michael Bonshaw has devised a formula to find out how happy a song is. For any music buffs out there, it's a major key, 7th chord, and 137 beats per minute. Now you know. Also to come, you cannot be serious about whose birthday it is today. Find out after the break. Had suffered significant issues with alcohol in the past, which resurfaced in recent months. Joined now by Martin Underhill, a former police officer who served as the Dorset Police and Crime Commissioner from 2012 to 2021 and was a detective involved in the Sarah Payne case in 2000. Hello to you. Thank you for joining us on the programme. Are the police oversharing?
Well, you can understand why people are saying that. Good morning, Kay. I don't think I've ever seen such a level of detail released before. There were various ways they could have said that yesterday without completely destroying Nicola's reputation, to be frank. And you have to ask, why are they doing that now? If they'd released that on day one, it would have completely changed the dynamic and the coverage of this story and perhaps prevented it becoming the juggernaut story it now is. So I'm confused why they've done what they've done now. You can understand why some people are saying it's victim blaming to protect their own reputation. I can't see how it progresses the case any further forward to 3 weeks in, to be frank. We'll have to wait to see, but I've got to say this case, more than any other missing person case I've been involved with over the years, has constantly led back to alleged mistakes by the police themselves.
Reports of concern for welfare. The police went to the house 2 weeks before. That sort of information as well would suggest a different line of inquiry, surely?
It would, and equally, because it says it was a police car with police and mental health professionals or health professionals, the subtext to that is that this was a mental health car. And clearly, this wasn't a domestic abuse scenario or a drunken person scenario. It was a mental health incident which Nicola was suffering. That is crucial, really. And I'm amazed it hasn't been released before. And of course, on February the 3rd in their press conference, they hadn't held many. In that February the 3rd conference, they actually said there were no significant issues involving Nicola's health. So they haven't released it then. I can understand in some ways why. It is completely destroying her reputation. It's a big move to take. But if you're not going to take it at the beginning of the inquiry, why now do it? I don't understand.
Yeah, why might they? Do you think it is to protect their reputation?
Well,